I lost someone that I've never met. It was also someone who died inside of my own body. So it was shock, it was anger, but to some degree also like embarrassment and shame. It's like I can't even do the one thing that I'm supposed to be doing as a woman. So then there's this clash of perception of what is my worth as a woman, as a person in this world. And then, so it was like rock bottom and then some extra heavy boulders on top.
Hello, and thanks for tuning into Power Perspectives, People Passion Purpose. I'm your host, Shannon, a transformation coach. And today my beautiful guest is a grief counselor and mental health supporter, owner and founder of Karin H. Counseling, author of the books How to Survive a Miscarriage and Nurturing Kindness. She's also a journalist, an avid blogger, and psychology student. I'm delighted to welcome Swiss native, now residing in Australia's Capital Territory, Karin Holmes. Welcome to Power Perspectives, Karin. Thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. And I'd love to just get into your powerful perspective. So, just in getting to connect with you, you shared, some pretty personal things that have now become your story and your story for helping others. So can you share a little bit about how you got to your counseling and what brought you here?
Yeah. I was in my previous life, as I tend to call it, I was a journalist, trained as a journalist, but then in 2011, I got pregnant unexpectedly and also lost the pregnancy very unexpectedly. So I had a miscarriage. And to me, that was my first real sort of experience of grief, and it just really knocked me for six. My world completely was turned upside down, and I struggled to cope, really, really struggled to cope. And obviously I could talk about that a lot more, but the result of sort of it was that because I felt so lonely and isolated, to me, my whole world just fell apart. But everybody around me was just like, meh. And, the world kept turning. Didn't understand. It's like my world just shattered into a million pieces and no one cares.
Yeah.
And it was just, from that feeling that I held on to. And I was like, if I could just help one person feel less alone, less, disempowered, then I would love to do that. And because I was, but maybe I still am a journalist. So I turned to writing to make sense of my own feelings, of my own experience. And before I knew it, I had a whole book together. It wasn't so much, it wasn't the intent. It was just, okay, writing helps me.
Yeah.
Maybe if I write, the second thought was, maybe if I write, it could help someone else.
Yeah.
And then it just sort of, it followed that path. And the first product or result of my experience was a book. And then the second result or change was becoming a counsellor, because I then decided to study as well.
Beautiful.
Very much driven by my own experience.
Yeah. That's thank you for sharing that. I know that's quite personal. And for you, do you find that you have recovered from that grief now, or do you feel like it's always a kind of ongoing process that we're always going to be working at overcoming grief?
I would say it is an ongoing process. So obviously for me, it was 2011. So that's
11.
Oh, there you go. It's actually interesting that we are having this conversation now, Shannon, because it happened literally sort of things started to go wrong, meaning I started to bleed on the June long weekend in 2011. And the 1st of July, which is coming up, excuse me, the 1st of July that's coming up was actually the actual day where I went into hospital eventually to have the pregnancy removed because my body couldn't do it by itself. This time of year is always, for me, anyway, a very reflective period where I'm just aware of what has happened.
Yeah.
And I feel even after 11 years, like it's hard to go through the 1st of July not thinking about what had happened that day.
Yeah.
Of course, it's now I'm more able to, be in a reflective kind of mood and not, this bottomless pit of sadness.
Yeah.
So that has certainly changed over the years. It doesn't change that I will always remember, but how I respond to it has changed.
And that's powerful, right? Do you have a celebration for, what would have been a birthday? Or I know some people, some women, they have a celebration on that day, and others do. We all deal with things in different ways. What do you do on July 1st or on this weekend, the weekend that kind of puts you off?
So in the first few years after the loss, I would always do something like sort of, not celebrate, it's a strong word, but sort of work consciously, and either, take the day off work or just, do something nice for myself, just something small. Maybe, you see something in a shop window, you might want to buy it. At the moment, because life also has changed over the years, and where I'm at right now, but again, that could change in the future. But right now, I'm quite called to be very quiet and inwardly reflecting, so I won't be necessarily shouting it from the rooftops. This 1st July coming. But, again, I'll just honor whatever space I'm at, and that's what I'll do.
That's great. And if I can ask you, like, that would seem like a very dark place to overcome from. Was that kind of your rock bottom? And if so, how did you get out of your rock bottom? Like, obviously through writing, but what advice would you give other women in the same experience to get out of that?
It was definitely my absolute rock bottom, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I hit, as life can teach one person, you can hit other rock bottoms. But that was definitely my first one and the hardest to come out, because to me, it was just everything at once. So it wasn't that there was a loss. It was also, how should I put this? Well, to me, a complex loss, because I lost someone that I've never met. It was also someone who died inside of my own body. So it was shock, it was anger, but to some degree also like embarrassment and shame. It's like, I can't even do the one thing that I'm supposed to be doing as a woman. So, then there's this clash of perception of what is my worth as a woman, as a person in this world. And then, so it was like rock bottom and then some extra heavy boulders on top.
Yeah.
For me anyway. And yes, certainly writing. I would, but that's just how I roll. I would sort of maybe, if I was to give advice, is certainly to reach out to people that understand and that get it, because I ended up connecting with other women in a similar situation. And sometimes just someone sort of say to you, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Is more powerful than someone sort of go, those platitudes, oh, it'll be okay, or at least now you get pregnant. That is just really, really hurtful. Someone that sort of says, I'm so sorry, I get it, is all that's needed. I always say to people, in my opinion, less is more. So it means less words, more presence, physical. Show that person that they're not alone, because that's what it is. It's a lonely, isolating experience. So reaching out, if you can, to the right kind of people is very powerful.
Getting that support. And so many people in any kind of loss or death of a loved one or just, trauma, we as humans go into this it's just me and no one can feel my pain. And this is so hurtful. And I don't know if I'm going to come out of this, but I've got to wear the mask in front of the world and go out every day and pretend I'm great. And someone asks you how you are and you're like, fine, how are you? But if you're not. And I think that's so important to develop these support groups or join them, because there always will be a group support. You just need to find it, I think. So for yourself as well, you didn't just join a support group. You kind of then are now that support for others. Can you share a little bit about, like, so your counseling, what are you most passionate about in your work that you're doing with others?
To me, it's about stories. And, that we all have one, and we all deserve to own it and literally make it our own, rather than have it driven by outside perceptions, outside ideas, outside opinions. Like, make it your own. And I feel that, to me, it's just so powerful and healing. Like, it makes me so excited. Because I feel part of healing is also, if people are ready to tell their story, because you just never know when you tell your story how you can help others. I mean, it might not always be obvious, but I do believe in the healing power of telling a story. Having said that, though, I have to be very clear here. I don't ever would want people feeling like they have to share their story. People, it will be enough that they can just own it. That's absolutely fine. So it's never like, oh, well, now you own it, go tell it. Not at all. Simply because so I really work with people on, what is it that you need? Like, let's listen inwardly, not outwardly, because everybody has an opinion, right? Mm-hmm. They will, oh, your hair looks terrible, or you take too long to feel better after losing your friend, pet, whatever. That's great. Not helpful. So I'm really that passionate about, let's look at you and let's see what we find in here, because it will surprise people what they can find inside of them, their strength, their resilience, their passion. And that's really what I'm all about, unearthing, uncovering that and you for healing.
That's so great. And I think I've got such an alignment with that, because this is why I want to make this show, is like, I want people to share their story. And you never know, it just might help one person that they heard, Karin Holmes on this Power Perspectives, like, oh, I should find a support group, that one little information bit, or just even signing up people to talk on these. People want to share their story. There's an expression inside people and it's burning to tell it. I've also graduated from journalism too. So you and I might just have that kind of like expression, and words never do what feelings can, but it's a tool to have us try. It's a tool to have us at least express. Yeah. So I love that you're so like, what's your story? And people get to either choose being the victim or the victor. I think we're all working. I think we're all working with similar themes of being the perpetrator or the prey or the victim, or in sharing our stories is where we find that grows to evolution, I think. So I think that's great that you have that.
So true. So true. And even, if we look at storytelling only by itself, we do know, obviously I'm be careful here as a white person to go too much into it. But, when we look at Indigenous tribes all over the world, that has always been very powerful for connecting community, for sharing, passing down knowledge and wisdom, storytelling, sharing stories. And I'm just, obviously, I would never, claim to understand the power of that. I can just relate to it a little bit, where I do believe that anyone's story matters. Anyone's story is worth telling if the person chooses to do so. So if I can facilitate that, then it would be my absolute honor and privilege.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that. I wanted to ask you, just because you do speak to so many of your clients and to so many people experiencing grief, like, why do you think some people may take, like, we're all extremely different. And I understand the setting of your first 7 years, you're in the theta brainwave, you're developing your subconscious programming. But why do you think some people as you were saying earlier, can recover very quickly from or seem to be recovered very quickly from a traumatic event. And some people may never, or they take a decade, or they're gradually getting closer. Why do you think there's that varying degree?
That's a very good question. How much time do you have?
However much time you want.
All the time in the world. Look, it's you hit it on the nail on the head when you sort of said, the first 7 years or even more than that, where, we are being shaped. We are being sort of molded to some degree by experience, by interaction, by connection, by attachment to others, mainly caregivers, parents or any other caregivers. Mm-hmm. And it's really in those early days where sometimes a lot of our abilities are either nurtured or crippled, mm-hmm. always on purpose. And that's important. Like, we don't always, like parents or caregivers don't always on purpose, cripple or stifle their child's inner world. That's just what it is. Like Louise Hay says, we're all victims of victims. So I relate quite strongly to that. It's some imperfect person trying to raise another imperfect person. But it does come down to that, like, how do we experience and learn about the world in those early days, and how will that impact on how we later deal with things? And it's a hard, to me anyway, sort of truth to deal with, because it just sometimes comes down to someone who's been really supported and nurtured might just be able to cope better than someone who had to fight for their, right to survive from day one. So it's not pretty, definitely not pretty. And then it comes down to, who's with you at the time of a traumatic experience. Are you being supported? Are you being heard? And then, it's literally like layer upon layer that can just build up and make it either easier to deal with something or harder.
Mm. And you've written all about that. I mean, you've written, your first book was How to Survive a Miscarriage. Yes. If somebody was looking to, what would they walk away from that book with? Say, like, your top 3 kind of points, and I'll put a picture of the book up so people know what it looks like and they can get their hands on it. But what would you like people to take away when they're done reading that book?
Top 3.
You can do however many.
Accepted. Challenge accepted. Number 1 would be for everybody. So if I could just quickly elaborate. So it's How to Survive a Miscarriage, a guide for women, their friends, their partners, friends and families.
So important, yeah.
Yeah, so because I sort of wrote it in the aim of giving, hopefully, everybody something to walk away from, be it that you are the woman who suffered the loss, be it the partner or a friend or family member. Number 1, though, for everybody that I would wish they would walk away from is you are not alone. Mm. Number 2 is your loss is valid and it matters.
Yeah, that's great.
And number 3 is that give yourself time. I'm very passionate about that one. There is this perception that, and I mean, I experienced that myself, where people sort of go, oh, so that happened. Well, you should be okay now, right? No, you follow your own timeline and you travel that journey at your own pace.
Yeah, that's so great. And I think even just you saying those top 3, putting my mental self into the position of a woman that's just had this great loss, you feel held with those, like, give yourself time. It's okay. And just take it as it comes and get the support. That's great. And then your other book, I really like this, Nurturing Kindness. My platform is 3 good deeds a day. And it's just kindness to self is the first thing before kindness to the others, because you can't give from an empty cup. So I haven't actually been able to look through this, but Nurturing Kindness, what would you want readers to take away from this book? You can do top 3 again if you challenge accepted.
Challenge accepted once more.
Fantastic.
I think number 1 is what you just said, that, put your needs first and don't feel sort of selfish or ashamed or anything about it, because such social conditioning, especially for women. We are the nurturing type, and it has been hijacked and abused into sort of, well, if you're nurturing, then you nurture yourself last. Everybody else comes first. Yeah. So definitely put your needs first, because you can't empty. And number two is it's a bit similar, actually. Again, time. Give yourself time, but in this space, more allow yourself time to step away, have that break, change that mindset, but do it at your own pace again. Because again, people will have all kinds of ideas, but this is your journey. So you take your time. And number three is maybe a simple one, but I find it very powerful. It's just that kindness to ourselves, shown firstly to ourselves, is the most powerful thing there is. Because if you can look at yourself in just a less harsher light, it just starts to radiate. And, it's sort of like a ripple effect that not only helps yourself, but also those around you.
Yeah. It's contagious as well.
It is. It is. But I feel it's really important to sort of feel and own it. Well, but I'm showing kindness to myself first. Because it's a bit, well, that's my opinion anyway, a bit unheard of, because everybody goes, we need to be kind to one another. And we do so much. Oh, like everybody agrees on that. I just feel the other side of that coin is kindness to myself.
Yes. I think that's so important. And getting into some kind of more esoteric or philosophical or quantum physics kind of version of it is there is no other. There's just one energy that's just individuated, but kindness to self is kindness to the other. Kindness to the other is kindness to self. But I definitely 100% agree with you is you cannot give from that empty cup. Like you love here first, and you'll have enough love for everything else. So that's beautiful. Thank you. And I'll put some links up, but I'd also love to get the book myself. So that would be great to have info on that. I'll put in the description. What would you wish that more people knew about your work, men and women, just to do with grief or miscarriages or anything with your work? What do you wish more people knew or didn't have a stigma about?
I find that hard to answer, because it's also, because it applies to me as well, what I wish people knew. Sometimes it's like, I wish I would be better at knowing as well. Is, that it comes down to, if it comes to me, grief or mental health, such as depression and anxiety, what they sort of have in common is that people are pushed into suffering silently. It's considered uncomfortable. It's considered, yucky, and people don't want to hear it. So we retreat, and we stop ourselves from healing or telling our stories once more. And I really wish people could see that that's the wrong narrative. There is no shame in struggling with mental health. There is no shame struggling after loss. That, there is so much potential, and still so much is possible for all of us. That's what I really wish for. And I find it hard to tell you that, though, because I still fall into that trap of just shutting down and not talking about it.
I think we're so conditioned. We're so conditioned as a society to be in the world is to, buy this product because you're not this enough. That's essentially it. And the lowest vibrations, the lowest frequencies are shame, guilt, fear. And that is what also we're connected to. So every person is feeling like this, but every person is united by that. So, I wish more people knew about that too, including myself. So thanks for being brave enough to share that. Well, I'd love to ask you, so obviously you're reading so much, you're taking psychology in uni right now. Can I ask you what kind of literary works, a quote, a book, a movie, a sentiment, something like that, has helped shape your your world has helped shaped your perspective?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot. So,
Journalist, of course, you're into writing.
I'll try and I'll keep it short.
Okay.
So from a professional point of view, I have found a lot of sort of solace and comfort in the works of Bessel van der Kolk and Gabor Mate, who talk a lot about, how we hold on to trauma in our body and it manifests itself in physical pain. So that is obviously, to me, is experience when I first came in touch with their work, because our mind speaks through our bodies, which I feel a lot of people have that massive disconnect of, I always have this headache, but I'm fine. And the doctor says I'm fine. And now my question in my head is, but what would your counselor say?
Yeah.
So that definitely. And I just I love everything. That's big. I'm going to say, I just love everything, and I'm intrigued and drawn to everything that sort of questions the status quo. Maybe that's a bit of the troublemaker inside of me that sort of goes, well, simply because this exists the way it does. Why is it good?
Yeah.
But also on a more personal level, I've been thinking about that because I've been reading ever since, I could read. Yeah. And it's just the works, I would say, of Cynthia Voigt. She's an American author who just stay with me because she tells, again, a story that is besides the normal narrative, and it's so powerful. So anything that is just, this is sort of like the norm, and then there's something over here. I'm going straight for that.
Oh,
that's the juicy part.
It's a bit of a big question, but how do you want to be remembered? Like, what impact, and you're already having it, you're helping so many people, but what impact do you want to have on the world? How do you want to be remembered for your time here?
What? I find that hard to answer because I feel like I'm not, that important.
Well, that's not true.
I really see myself as a, for lack of better word, channel or vessel or blob, that just sort of that guides people. People go, I can't do this. I'm like, but you can.
Yeah.
So I would love to, I guess, be remembered as someone who's just this champion of other people's strengths and resilience and stories, and maybe having been that person that kickstarted or helped move it along so that people just can step into their own power and speak their truth. So if I can play a part in enabling that, then to me that sounds like an awesome kind of legacy.
It sounds like an awesome legacy to me too. That's great.
Thanks for tuning into Power Perspectives, People, Passion, Purpose. My guest today was Karin Holmes, grief counselor, mental health supporter, author, and so much more. You can find her at KarinHolmes.com and her books, How to Survive a Miscarriage, a guide for women, their partners, friends, and families, as well as Nurturing Kindness, a manifesto for unapologetic self-love and healing, are available on Amazon. Until next time, remember, the ability to shift perspectives is one of our greatest powers. I'm Shannon. Thanks for being with me. It means a lot.